Well, thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate. My name is August, and I'm the executive director of the LGBTQ History Project. Today on the panel, we have Llee Heflin and Kilhefner, who are both members of the Los Angeles Gay Liberation Front, which was the pioneering revolutionary gay activist group founded in the aftermath of the June 28th, 1969 Stonewall Rebellion. We're going to focus on their life back then and their visions of the future, what they think of what's currently happening. I'm going to turn off my camera so we just have the two of them. But I'd like to start with you, Dr. Don. How did you hear about Stonewall? How did you hear about Stonewall? And what did it stir up in you?
I was a doctoral student at UCLA. I read about it in the graduate research library one day. And then in the LA Free Press, I read about the Gay Liberation Front meeting. I went to it and I went to every meeting ever since.
How were gay men oppressed in 1970?
Well, it's not talking about 1970. The importance of gay liberation, the gay liberation movement, is that it came at the end of 1,000 years of continuous oppression and violence against gay men and lesbians. And in 1969, with the Stonewall Rebellion, a new narrative began to get formed. And that new narrative came out of gay liberation fronts across the country. And in Los Angeles, it was the Gay Liberation Front that led that revolution. It was a gay liberation revolution. And it's important we understand that. You, in your title for this talk, you titled it Queer Rebellion. Well, we haven't had a queer rebellion yet. The queer generation might have a queer liberation front. It might have its own version of a queer rebellion, but it hasn't happened yet. And therefore, we need to make a connection between what happened then and what's happening now. Is that under 3 minutes?
That was great. That was great. Llee, how did you get involved with gay liberation?
I haven't any clue. Uh, I haven't any clue how it happened. It was, in a sense, it was in the air. I had no connections like Dawn. It was in the air. And me and my I don't know. No, I don't know how I got involved. It was the, in a way, it was a fulfillment of my drug experience. I was possibly the first LSD dealer in the gay scene in Los Angeles. I would go to the bars on Friday night, take orders, and I'd go to the bars on Saturday night and deliver. And over the course of I don't know, 6 months or so, I watched the gay scene blossom in a way it had not blossomed before. I went to hardcore biker bars, and they were probably the most self-loathing of the gay people I knew. And 6 months with acid they had turned into sunflowers, and I remember one of them showed up at the bar one Friday or Saturday night, and he had on a little, very thin string of beads. And he was very nervous about it. And I went up to him, I said, "Hey, dude, really, really dig your beads." And he just blossomed. And it just all kind of flowed into gay liberation. There was a fairly small contingent of us sort of hippies that kept the fire burning under GLF in Los Angeles. Don, do you remember? I don't remember the name of the bar, but in those days, even if there was a dance floor in the bar, you couldn't touch while you were dancing. There was no touching.
Well, there was also no dancing. That came later.
Well, at this point, we radical fags decided, fuck this, no touching shit. And we organized a touch-in at one of the major gay bars in LA. And on Saturday night, we all drifted in and blah, blah, blah. And
yeah, it came from Stan Williams, and it was organized by the Gay Liberation Front.
Well, I don't, what I remember was the experience.
Truly.
And at a certain point, one of us blew a whistle, and we all started embracing each other. And the bar people were freaking out. Well, you can't. And I said to them, "What are you going to do? Call the police?" And
no, the police did come.
No, the police did not come.
There were 4 sheriff's cars outside. The police walked into the bar from the front to the back. Gay men kept embracing each other. They walked out. The lights went off. The music started playing again. And history was made by that evening.
Well, like I say, this was a long time ago for me. I remember the experience and the sense of liberation.
It was an act of self-defiance. It was an act of gay defiance. It was an act of civil disobedience. One of the best things that has happened in U.S. history in a long time. Black people were our models. First Nation people were our models. Latino people were our models. Asian Americans were our models. And we did our part in that social revolution.
Well, you see, Don remembers it from his activist perspective. I remember it from the experience.
Now, I had experiences at those events as well.
I know.
So there's
I know.
both a event as it happened, and it's also a personal experience. And I appreciate hearing your personal experience.
Well, what I
August,
okay.
Yeah, Don, can you talk about an action that you participated in the Gay Liberation Front?
ask that question again.
Can you talk about an action that you participated in that you
First
want?
of all, you need to be aware of what was happening at that time. This was a liberation movement. This was not a civil rights movement, it was a liberation movement. And in a liberation movement, you're changing the power structure of the relationship between hetero supremacists and gay people that existed for over 1,000 years in the West. Just as women were challenging male supremacy, just as Black people were challenging white supremacy, gay people were challenging hetero supremacy, and we weren't doing it just to get civil rights. We were talking about changing society, changing the economic structure, changing the social structure, changing the educational structure. A revolution was being fomented. Now, in today's age, people forget that. They don't know what revolution means. They don't know what radical social change means. They don't know what militant action means. But the Gay Liberation Front of Los Angeles was all of that. And it came about because we were able to get a Gay Liberation Front office in January of 1970. And out of that office, we organized. And 1970 was filled with one GLF militant action after the other. And by the end of 1970, a critical mass was beginning to develop in the gay community. A gay awakening, a lesbian awakening, a trans awakening was taking place. And it affected the whole society. And it affected us. Internally, there was a revolution taking place. And we were now self-accepting ourselves and fighting back. And it worked. It worked. It was effective. Both external revolution and internal revolution. Does that answer your question?
It does, it does. Llee, is there an action besides the touch-in that you would like to talk about?
Well, our confrontation with the psychological association people was radical in that the dynamic changed in that meeting. And again, Don, this is how I remember it. The organizer of the conference said, "All right, now what do you want?" And we said, "We want to educate you about us." And the auditorium, the seating was folding chairs, and so we had the meeting break up into small groups of 10 or 12 with two or more of us with each group. And I can only speak from my group, my experience. It was an extraordinarily positive experience for everybody. These people had never talked to a gay person except as someone who was sick. And I sat there and I said, look, I'm no more aberrant, no more sick than you are. My life experience is as valid as yours. And, again, God, 50 years ago? Anyway, by the end of half an hour or more, the group, these people had a life-changing experience. There were a lot of tears, of positive tears. Some of these psychologists came out during these sessions. And at the end, there were just 10 minutes of hugs. And we left, if this is a right word, we left heroes. We had transformed the psychological community. Within, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years, they had removed homosexuality from their diagnostic book. And it was all done through loving communication.
What Llee is saying is correct, and I'd love to hear that personal account of what he experienced there. It was actually organized by the LA Gay Liberation Front. I made the proposal at the Sunday afternoon meeting, and the meeting accepted it. And basically, it was based on the ideas of Frantz Fanon, a mid-20th century revolutionary theorist. And he said that in a liberation movement, you have to change the power differential between those who have the power and those that don't. And that's what we brought into the room that day. A liberation strategy where no longer were we going to listen to them telling us who we are, but we began to tell them who we are. And to do that, we had to take over the meeting. There was a lot of resistance to it. We could have been arrested at any time. The LAPD SWAT team was assembling across the street in Pershing Square. And it's only because of the intercession of Dr. Al Marston of USC Psychology Department that sent them away, said there's no problem. And we were able to have the discussions. There were about maybe 15 of those small discussion groups that Llee mentioned. I went around to each one of them and listened. And it was amazing what was happening in those groups. As it turned out that day, there was the author of a book that came out called The Gay Militants that described what happened there that day. A filmmaker from USC, Ken Robinson, was filming the event for a documentary film on the first documentary film on the gay liberation movement. And a radio reporter was in the room. And an hour after the event took place, it was being broadcast all over the United States. And at that time, you have to remember, radio was how we got the most up-to-date news. And the country was getting it. So what Llee is describing is absolutely correct. But what happened was we changed the power differential in that room. They were listening to us rather than we listening to them. We had a dialogue, not a heterosupremacist monologue. But yeah, I think we were all touched by that. And it was a heroic act on our part. Does that?
Yeah, that's great. I would like to bring it to the present and the future now. Don, how are gay men oppressed in 2025?
Now, first of all, I've been involved in this for 60 continuous years in Los Angeles. I never went anywhere. I stayed here working in the gay community. It became my life's work. What we need to ask young people today, queer people today, and adults and old people as well, is how are you oppressed in the United States today? Because you have to remember, action always comes out of oppression. If people are satisfied, there's not going to be much action. If people are oppressed in some way, they will take action. So recently I had the experience of talking to a really bright young gay artist. And at the beginning of our conversation, he said, I was out walking in my neighborhood in East LA, and across the street, there were some people on the porch, and he started to yell hate words at me as a gay man. And I quickly got out of the neighborhood, he said. 30 minutes later, I asked him, how are you oppressed as a gay man? And he thought about that, and he said, I'm not oppressed. You see what's happening? There is a web of oppression around us in this country as gay people, particularly since the extreme right takeover of our country. And either people are unconscious of their oppression or they're denying that oppression. In a recent essay on in the LA Progressive, I mentioned ways that we might today get involved. I think a hybrid model is necessary today, and it will be the queer generation doing that, defining that for themselves. That hybrid model came out of the 2020 George Floyd demonstrations in this country, where we had an example of new technology as a means, not as an end, as a means of organizing people. And then people on the street, their feet on the pavement, on the streets, all across this country, in a way that we hardly ever see these days. And that is, I think, the model we need to use. New technology as a means, not an end by itself, and getting people involved in some way. You got to know your history. That history is alive in you today and touches everything you're doing in the world. So you got to know your history. Right now, the extreme right wing has come into power because it copied the methodology of the social revolutions happening in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s by grassroots organizing and by keeping it up over time. So currently, Trump did not create the movement, his base. His base created Trump, and Trump is enough of an opportunist to take advantage of that. So we need to have knowing your history, grassroots organizing, and consciousness raising. How are you oppressed as a queer person today? Just as my generation, the gay liberation revolution generation, had to ask, How are we oppressed today? And we could articulate it, just as Llee was talking about. We could articulate that. And we need to hear a younger generation articulate and a militant plan of action. If you're not oppressed, there will be no action. If you are oppressed, there will be action. And I suggest using a hybrid model of using the new technology, which I use, and organize people on a grassroots level on the street. The Democratic Party and the Human Rights Campaign, HRC, will not be the solution. Social change rarely comes from the top down. It comes from the bottom up. And that's what we need to organize today, from the bottom up. And it's happening. It's happening. People are doing that these days. And that will be the answer.
Thank you. You brought up an interesting point about how people are trying to work in the system compared to back then when it was fighting the system. Llee, how do you feel about today's LGBTQ movement engaging with corporations, the government, political parties?
Well, August, to be perfectly honest and frank, I don't think about it. It's not part of my life. Uh, I I live in rural Arkansas. My nearest little town, there's like population of 6,000. The whole area is MAGA people, MAGA. And all, I live in the country. There's a county road that runs in front of my house. And I walk on that road 3 times a day. I know, not necessarily by name, but I'm acquainted with virtually everybody that lives on the road. I think it's fairly obvious that I'm A, probably gay, and B, not mega. But I have wonderful relations with these people. Underneath their self-imposed ideas, they're decent human beings. If I don't appear on the road for a couple of days, they stop at my house and say, "Are you okay?" I wanted to bring up one experience I had recently at Walmart. There's a young customer service rep who works in the pharmacy. He's probably 25 or so, around there. And he's not by any means gay acting. He's not Farmer Butch, but he's not gay acting. But, except for one thing, he loves the acrylic fingernails that are so popular among women. He wears 1.5-inch acrylic nails at work in Walmart. The most recent version were robin egg blue, and they had embellishments on them. He's able to be himself at Walmart, and Walmart doesn't seem to apparently give a fuck. And none of the rural people who stand there in line for 10 minutes to get their prescription, when he waits on them, nobody says anything. I, on the other hand, always go, hey, dude, love the nails. Great. And he lights up. But I don't think he wants to talk about it. But there he is. Long blue fingernails. In an environment that you would not think that long blue fingernails on a man would be acceptable. There's a change. And at least in my environment, in rural Arkansas, this is a radical change. And in a sense, his putting on blue fingernails was a personal act of self-expression. This is who I am.
And self-defiance.
But Don, the defiance was or is muted. He's not, oh, look at my fingernail, look at my fingernail. Fuck you if you don't like my. No, he's doing his job, giving you your prescription, and whether you and you cannot help but see his blue fingernails. In this conservative environment, that it doesn't cause radical feedback, says that to a degree, the environment has changed. And it thrills my soul that this young man can express himself outwardly in such a way.
You think that's a result of the gay liberation revolution?
You know, Don, I have actually said, I mean, the next town, this is Berryville, Arkansas, 5 miles on my right. 9 miles on my left is Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Eureka Springs is very hippie and very gay. I was chef at a restaurant there for 25 years, and we were a gay rallying place. And I've actually said to a few of them, you have no idea what me and my people 50 years ago did to make your life comfortable now.
Amen.
And no, they don't know. And to a certain extent, they don't give a fuck. And, you know,
That's why I said just a moment ago, it's important that you know your history, because what you're saying, Llee, is correct. And at the same time, there are trans people being murdered in this country. There are gay and lesbian people where there's violence shown against them. And we can't close our eyes to that. We can't close our eyes to the fact that gay men are being beheaded in Saudi Arabia. In Afghanistan, they're being hunted down and murdered. That in much of the world, including the United States, there's a reaction against gay liberation taking place. And you can't close your eyes to that.
John, I understand this. I spend a lot of time with the news. But it's like fucking Israel and Gaza. I can't do anything about that. I can't do anything about the Taliban. You can't do anything about the Taliban.
There are gay people doing something about the Taliban.
Well, but you know, Don, they have to be Afghani. We can't do anything about it.
We can. I'm part of an underground network that are smuggling gay and lesbian people out of Afghanistan to safety. We can do something about it.
Well, that does not change the Taliban. That does not, you know, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, all flowed from the same roots. And Islam was the final flower. And I think Muhammad probably learned it a lot from, and it's hard for me to not say fucking Peter, who created Christianity. Jesus didn't create Christianity. Jesus came to bring a message to his own people, and they rejected it.
You know, Llee, recently somebody showed me a 15-second video clip from Iraq. And he promised me that I couldn't show it to anybody else on condition of seeing it. And I promised him I wouldn't. And it was a 15-second video clip of a young gay man, maybe late teens, early 20s, being stoned to death.
Yeah, bro.
Stoned to death. And I forced myself to watch that. Because that's important. August, yes, we need a moderator, August.
Let's keep going. So, Don, do you think there's a gay liberation movement today?
Today, there is no gay liberation movement. There's a need for a gay liberation movement or a queer liberation movement. Let me correct that. There's a need for a queer liberation movement. But a gay liberation movement does not exist. Gay men have largely disappeared, living their own lives. Lesbians have largely disappeared, living their own lives. Nobody's tending to the store. And as a result of that, we're now in a period of pushback. The rescinding of Roe versus Wade by the Supreme Court, that same methodology is being used today to take away same-sex marriage and recriminalize homosexual acts. They have a game plan. So two Supreme Court justices maladroitly have even voiced their opinion that they have a game plan to do that. And there's no gay movement. Everybody is busy watching Netflix, getting lost in their own lives. And as a result, much of those advances are in the process of being pushed back. And there needs to be another awakening among gay people because we can change things. What is the quality of Black people's lives in 1960? It's very different today than when it was in 1960. Why? Because they fought back relentlessly for centuries. Women today, their lives are very different than they were in 1960. Today, half of the admissions to medical school programs and law school programs are women. That would have been unheard of in 1960. Today, we, as a result of that gay liberation revolution and what went before, gay people have some self-respect. We have a clearing in the forest that we didn't have before. And so I would say there is change that's possible. We've seen it in our own lifetime, but we need to organize and we need to act. And we need to ask ourselves the question, how am I oppressed today by heterosupremacy? Does that answer your question, August?
That does. That's great. Thank you. I'm just going to end with one question to Llee, and then we'll do a Q&A. But Llee, you mentioned that you don't want to integrate into society. What happens when gay people have a white picket fence and 1.94 children?
Okay, say that again.
What happens when gay men assimilate?
I don't think we assimilate. I think what assimilates is the broader society to us. Don talked about lesbians going off and living their lives, gay men going off and living their lives. I think to a certain extent, that's what we fought for in the 60s. The oppression, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, they're like 200 years ago. They're not contemporary. They don't live in the same world that we do. It's like, like I say, it's 300 years ago.
No, I would disagree. The young man that I helped smuggle out of Afghanistan and getting to freedom in Canada, he knew all about Stonewall. He knew all about pronouns because the internet has connected him. And he's aware of these things all around the world.
I'm talking about the broader, I'm talking about the oppressor. The oppressor is from 300 years ago, still active today.
Yes, it is.
And to a certain extent, the oppressor from 100 years ago is still active today, with people sitting on their porch hollering faggot at some kid walking by. You know, in the news recently was a story. An autistic boy, maybe 8, 9 years old, was wearing rainbow framed glasses. And some 10, 11-year-old boy started calling him faggot, blah, 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 and told him, just go fucking kill yourself, fag kid. Well, a few days later, the mother found her autistic son heading out the door with the big kitchen knife. And she said, where are you going with that? And he said, I'm going to go kill myself. The autistic boy was immediately bundled off to therapy. I'll use that word. And where he stayed for 4 or 5 days. And during that time, the boy was obsessed with cars. And during the time that he was in therapy, the mother went on and line and said, anybody out there who's a car aficionado who would come to be here at my house when my boy gets out of therapy, so he's got something positive to relate to, I would really appreciate it. Well, somebody in the area who was a car enthusiast picked up on this and put out over 150 cars showed up. And the kid had some feedback, some positive feedback of just an enormous kind. And it's this kind of thing, to me, where we work best. This kid will now wear his rainbow glasses, and if somebody says anything, he knows, as Don would say, as much as an autistic boy could, to fight back and say, no, my glasses are okay. I'm okay. This is the important thing. I'm okay. This
You
is what,
see that as that's the way for that young boy to fight back?
it's the only way he has.
You got it.
It's the only way he has. And, to me, gay liberation back in the 60s and 70s was individual liberating him or herself from the oppressors.
I would say it's both individual and it was collective at the same time. It was changing a society and changing ourselves.
But
And I say that to you lovingly.
the root was self-realization. spreading. And the more we were self-liberated, the more we were able to say, fuck you, I'm okay.
And the more we were collectively liberated, the more we could say, I'm going to liberate myself. It isn't either or. It isn't either or. It's both ends of those. Both ends.
Well, from my perspective, the liberation begins with self. Then it spreads into the social scene. And then it spreads from individual to individual to individual. And to me, seeing the young man at Walmart with his blue fingernails made me feel that I had accomplished something 60 years ago.
I agree with you. You did. You did.
I want
And
to
okay.
let's hop into the Q&A. So
Okay.
if anyone has questions, put them in the chat.
Okay.
The first one is for you, Don. What concrete steps should be taken?
Now, let me just say, I've been giving you concrete steps. I said, know your history. Learn something about the history of the last 60 years, the last 1,000 of years, as far as gay people are concerned. So I have said that. That's number one. Number two, grassroots organizing from the bottom up. Get together a group of people and do something. Organize, organize, organize. There is that stream in American history. And it's said best in Howard Zinn's book, A People's History of the United States, where he talks about organize, organize, organize from the bottom up. Social change does not come from the top down. It never has. It comes from the bottom up. And the third thing is you have to become aware of how you're oppressed today. Anybody, any gay person, lesbian person, trans person, reading the news today and does not know how they're oppressed today, well, I wonder about them because it's very clear how you're oppressed today. So those are three things. I want to keep it simple. Know your history. Organize, organize, organize. And organize with people. I hybrid model using both new technology as a means and organizing people on the streets. And thirdly, you got to ask yourself the question, how am I oppressed today? Because action will come out of oppression. Llee and I acted in the late 60s, 70s, in my case for 60 years, because we are oppressed as gay people. So again, keep it simple. Those are three concrete recommendations I'm making. And thank you for the question.
People are raising their hand, but you have to type it in the Q&A for us to see it, or in the comments or the chat.
While you're waiting, August, I'd like to respond to something that we've talked about, and that is, anyways, let me back off. I turn it over to you. I don't want to go back.
Here's a question from someone named Sean. We'll go for you, Llee. Why do you think, when so much of the data shows otherwise, that the oppression of gay men is difficult for people to recognize?
Now, who is this for?
You can answer that if you want.
Well, Maybe because look, we're talking about the fucking United States. In the United States, I don't think a majority of gay people are confronting oppression in their daily lives. Don and I, 50, 60 years ago, made that possible. And to me, that was a goal. Yeah, you know, I left Los Angeles, California, San Francisco in the early 70s. And I ended up 5 years in Spain, 5 years in England, time in Morocco, time in Italy. I was in India twice. And I never felt oppressed. When I went to see my teacher the first time, for, I don't know, 20 years, I made my living making clothes. And I went to see my teacher one day, and I was wearing a pair of pants. It was India, Bombay, hot. I was wearing a pair of cotton drawstring pants. The fabric was black and it had little flowers on it. And I'm sitting there in the meeting. There's like 20 other people, and the teacher says to me, "Why are you wearing women's pants?" And I said, "Maharaj, I was not aware that pants had a gender. They're just pants." And that closed the question. And, you know, your poster for this webinar had a picture from Life magazine with three of us in what we called gender fuck drag back then. And my two companions had dressed up for the occasion of this picture being taken. The way I dressed was how I dressed all the time.
I second that motion. Yes, Llee is telling the truth.
And one day I said, and I don't know why I said this to myself. I wonder if I have the balls to just put on a dress over my Levi's and cowboy boots and go to Safeway and do grocery shopping. And I said, well, there's only one way to find out. So I went to thrift store and I bought the kind of dress that my grandmother would have worn around, doing chores in the farm. And it was just a shapeless dress. And I put that on over my Levi's and cowboy boots and, beard, long hair. And I went to Safeway and did my grocery shopping. And I was astonished that there was not a ripple in the universe over this. And the thing, the extension of that was that I found the fabric. I found wearing fabric an enjoyable experience. The way it moved, the way it flowed around you. And I thought, I like this. And
I remind Llee that he was doing it in Silver Lake, liberating gay territory. And in East Jesus, Iowa, he probably wouldn't have gotten away with it.
well,
Let's another question.
Okay.
So oppression takes many forms. This is for you, Don. Oppression takes many forms. What vision do you have for a future without oppression? What would it look like for gay men?
I have written about what a queer liberation movement might look like and what the next stage might be like. But I hasten to add, it's not for me to say. It's for me to support those who will be creating it. One of the things I think is one of the ways we're oppressed is still by religion.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church.
Yes.
The Catholic Church.
Yes.
The Catholic Church today says in their dogma, we are innately morally disordered. And the punishment for that is we will burn for all eternity in hell. Pope Francis makes homophobic comments, hate words privately. He speaks another language publicly. So I don't see why the queer liberation movement isn't fighting back against that, like we did against the APA. I would say it also involves proactive organizing in the community, keeping that community alive, because it is that community which has empowered us. We weren't alone anymore. We were in a community, and by community, I mean we assumed responsibility for each other over time. That's why the third stage of gay liberation in Los Angeles was the creation of the Gay Community Services Center. I would love to see a queer community creative arts center, performing arts center in Los Angeles, because not only is acculturation taking place, but enculturation taking place. Not only are we becoming part, or there's an opportunity to become a part of the larger society in a pluralistic society, but there needs to also be a gay-centered part of that development, which involves a now-queer development, creative development part of that, which is based on what is inside of us that needs to come out. And it's a beautiful, beautiful message. Another thing that needs to happen with that queer liberation movement is a change in our definition. When we define ourselves solely by sexual behavior, we are adopting what the last 1,000 years heterosupremacy has told us we are. Nothing but a sex act. It's not wrong. That's the tail wagging the dog. We need to look at what is the content of that dog. That's why there is a need for a redefinition, a revisioning of who we are as gay people. I call it a essentialist / social contribution model based on breakthroughs in biological evolution theory. Why people like us have been around for the last 5,000 years, at least. What are we doing that makes us so essential that we keep reappearing century after century after century till right now? We must be doing something that which is contributing to the evolution of our species. That's the question we need to be asking, not which orifice. And I love those orifices. Don't get me wrong, but something larger than what orifice are we engaged with? It has to be a revisioning and a redefinition of who we are. So those are three possible ways a queer liberation movement might evolve in the future. I hope that answered your question.
I think you answered it beautifully.
Thank you.
And fully to the last drop.
It's why I carry you in my heart for 6 years.
But I have one caveat to broach. I don't think we have, as gay people, as a function homosexuality is simply a genetic variation that heterosexual reproduction throws off. Is there a reason? I don't think there is a reason. Change, variation doesn't happen for a reason. It just happens. I've been for the last 15 years or so involved in horticulture hybridizing. Variation doesn't have a purpose. It just is. And like I said, my understanding is heterosexual reproduction throws off a variation that lacks the imperative for reproduction. That's what I see gay people are. And it doesn't have a purpose. One could say one of the purposes is that it modulates reproduction. We keep us from overrunning the planet more than we do. But no, I don't think we have a purpose. We're
Lee.
no, let me finish,
Okay.
please. I think what this does is that it frees us up individually to define purpose for our individual life.
Can I interject here?
Whatever objective you bring to it.
Yeah,
you know. Here's the difference between, I think, between you and me, Don. You think, as it were, globally, whereas I think individually. And I think individually is what the global depends on. You mentioned the
could I
what
interject for
what
a moment? No, let me interject for a moment. You are getting caught up in either or thinking, and I would suggest both and thinking. It's both the individual and the collective, the global. It's both of those at the same time, and it's more than that. Individualism is one of the streaks in American culture. I understand that. But there's also something larger going on. Like that squirrel outside my window right now looking at me. There's something locally going on. Both of those are necessary for the alchemical union to take place, what Carl Jung called mysterium conjunctus, the mysterious conjunction, for the alchemical union to take place, something new to come into being.
Okay, we have a lot of Q&As. So I'm gonna ask this one for Dawn. How do you feel about straight actors playing gay people in film and television?
Oh, Jesus.
It's a non-issue. Actors are actors, and I encourage them to do what they do best, taking on a role and embodying it. It's a non-issue. Next question.
So this is from Randy Wicker, who was a member of the Mattachine Society and a lifelong gay activist. Should World Pride hold its event, remove this year's event from Washington, D.C. based on the MAGA government?
Say that again to be Argus.
Should World Pride move their location from Washington, D.C. based on the MAGA government?
What's the question?
Should World Pride move its location from Washington, D.C.?
What we need to do is ask the question, how am I oppressed today? Is that a sign of our oppression or not? And if it is a sign of our oppression, we need to figure out how to fight back. This is simple. This is not rocket science.
Did the Gay Liberation Front... Oh, do you want to say something, Llee?
No, I'm just reacting.
What's your reaction?
To say, should we take something out of Washington, D.C.? I think Don sort of said it. What do you what? A non-issue. And it's that kind of, as it were, activism, which to me is perfectly useless, achieves nothing. I don't know. But on the other hand, do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. So if you want to be active on, oh, we'll take something out of Washington D.C., blah, 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 fine. Do what you want. Everybody, do what you want. Do what you will. What is your involvement in what is your involvement in life?
Next question, August.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask one more question. Someone wants to know what organization you're working with, Don, for the Afghanistan.
Ask the question again.
You mentioned
What?
you're working with an underground organization.
Oh, Rainbow Underground in Canada. The underground is the above ground mechanism. The underground I can't talk about because it's underground. But if you contact me by email, Don Kilhefner at sbcglobal.net, sbcglobal.net, I will talk to you about this and connect you with who you need to be connected with.
Okay.
And that goes for anybody. Don Kilhefner at sbcglobal.net. Thank you, August.
Yes.
August, you don't seem to have any questions for me.
I'm asking questions to you. What can we learn from the past, Llee? How do we apply it to today?
Well, philosophers say if you don't know the past, you're almost bound to repeat it. Yeah. But to know the past, I mean, this is a life's work. And it's ongoing. And yeah, be aware of where we've come from. But here's the problem. Who's telling us where we've come from? Who's telling us what our origins are? In a certain sense, they are our oppressors. History doesn't exist except that we make it. And we make it to satisfy ourselves. And trying to extract truth out of history, extremely difficult.
Do either of you have any closing reflections?
Could I respond to what Llee said?
Of course.
George Orwell once said, and I think it's correct, George Orwell, 1984, said, the way to destroy a people is to deny them their history. The way to destroy a people is to deny them their history. That's why what Llee is saying and what I'm saying about history is so important. Without that history, a people destroys itself. That history is essential, and it's alive in us every day in our daily living. It's not something in the past, like we read in books. It's alive in us. And we as gay and lesbian people should know that. Our liberation is only 60 years old. We should know that.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to our panelists. Really appreciate everyone participating.
August, I love the work that you're doing, and it's a delight to see Llee. And when I say I carry him in my heart, I mean that. He has been a big influence on my life, and I bless him in any way I can. And Llee and August, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. This was great. Really appreciate it. And it's good to have y'all reunited as well. Thank you to everyone who left a nice comment and not nice comment. We appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a good day.
Oh,
I,
I'm
I,
waiting to hear those bad comments from you, August.
I have one question.
Of course.
The artwork on the wall behind you
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
is, what is its provenance? What is its story?
It's a painting of this lady named Bambi Lake, who was in the Coquettes and Angels of Light and was a singer.
Beautiful.
Thank
God, the good old days. This is what is so remarkable about that period. It was fabulous fun. We we felt no inhibitions.
We felt alive.
Yeah, yes, Don. We gay people became self-liberating on every front.
Amen.
And oh my God, the Cockheads, the Angels, they were angels of light. They they pushed the boundaries like the boundaries had never been pushed before. This is what was most profound about this time. We pushed the boundaries like they had never been pushed before. And the world survived. This is to me an important thing. The universe survived. The universe did not fall apart because that person presented herself to the world like that. The universe survived because I dressed up like I did. The universe survived because this young man at Walmart wears blue fingernails. We're part of the universe. And all that we do is an expression of the universe. That picture, that person is an expression of the universe going, yes, yes, see me. See how beautiful I am. And the universe said yes. This is what I don't think we've said today. The universe has said yes to us. The universe has embraced us for thousands of years. Despite all of our self oppression, the universe never oppressed us. It was us oppressing us. the universe said, I love you. And that's what I wanted gay people to see when I was an activist.
I would add to that, hetero supremacy also played its role.
Oh, well, oh, yeah, they were, hetero supremacy, the fucking family, the fucking Christian religion, the psychological, psychiatric, the whole science, the government, and we survived.
We fought back and survived.
Yes, we fought back and we survived. And the world, and again, we have to say, we're talking about the Western world, about the United States. The United States, the Western world, is what it is today because of what we did.
Amen.
I
Okay.
love you, Llee.
Mwah, mwah,
I
mwah.
love you. I love you, August.
Thank you. Love you too. Hope everyone has a great day.
I hope the people who attended this had enjoyed it. I hope we were entertaining and that they had a good time.
Were there 45 questions and answers?
There's so many questions in here.
Are you saving them?
Yes, I took photos of some of them.
I would love to see those 45 questions.
Okay, I'll send them to you.
Yeah.
And Llee, we want to see those questions.
But to me, I hope the people attending come away feeling as good as we did when we left that meeting of the Psychologists Association. My God, we felt good, didn't we, Don?
Yes, indeed.
We felt
alive and liberated.
Yeah, and we felt that we had liberated the world. This is the important thing. Gay liberation is the liberation of humanity. And it's a long, hard struggle. Anyway, goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, Llee. Goodbye,
Bye,
Llee.
everyone.
Goodbye, August.
Thank you, Dr. Don. Talk to you boys soon. Bye.
All right.